Hello Year 7. Last lesson you researched who the Irish migrants and the West Indian migrants were, all to do with economic migration. Today we're going to take that a step further and look at some sources from the time about those two different groups. Here are the sources. You may wish to print these out. It will be useful if you can. If you can't, then just note down the quotes that you want to pay attention to and imagine that you were annotating those, or you could copy these out if you wanted. So, the first thing I would like you to do is to read through each of these sources. And I want you to see what you can find out about how British people reacted to the economic migrants. So in source A, it is an extract from The Condition of the Working Class in England by a man called Friedrich Engels, and that was published in 1845. Source B is an extract from the Rivers of Blood speech by a man called Enoch Powell on the 20th of April 1968. Now, you may have seen these sources when you did your research from last lesson. I'm going to read through them and talk a little bit about what kinds of things you might pick out of it, and then you can make your annotations. So, this says that the worst dwellings are good enough for the Irish. Their clothing causes them little troubles, so long as it holds together by a single thread. Shows they know not. Their food consists of potatoes and potatoes only. Whatever they earn beyond their needs is usually spent upon drink. What does such a race want with high wages? The worst quarters of all large towns are inhabited by Irishmen. So have a think, what does this person think about Irish migrants? Does it sound like they're being particularly kind towards the Irish people, or does it sound like they're being quite horrible towards them? So, for example, it says that the worst dwellings are good enough for them. Do you think the Irish people are going to settle for the worst dwellings, or is that saying that they actually don't deserve any better than the worst? Perhaps think about the fact that it's saying that whatever they earn but on their needs is usually spent upon drink. So what does Engels think about Irish people? And how does this suggest British people were reacting to economic migrants? Source B, our Rivers of Blood speech, says, in 15 or 20 years, on present trends, there will be in this country 3.5 million immigrants and their descendants. By the year 2000, it must be in the region of 5 to 7 million. The natural and rational first question to ask is, how can the numbers of immigrants be reduced? The answer, by stopping or virtually stopping further inflow and by promoting maximum outflow. As I look ahead, I am filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. So, have a think about what Enoch Powell seems to think about the influx of people to Britain, and specifically he's talking about people from the West Indies and the Windrush generation. Now, at the time, Powell's speech caused a lot of sensation in the media. He was a leading Conservative politician, and he actually got sacked from his job for this. So what might that tell you about the kinds of things he's saying and whether or not they were acceptable? Remember, though, that over 1,000 dock workers went on strike at his dismissal. How does this suggest he felt about migration? Did he think it was a good thing? If so, what parts of it suggest that he does? Did he think it was a bad thing? If so, what parts of it suggest that he does? Have a look at these sources. Pick out any quotes that you can to suggest about what these people think. I also want you to have a think about whether or not these two sources can represent everybody's opinion on migrants to Britain. So, for example, do the words of Enoch Powell suggest to us that everybody in Britain felt this way? Or do they suggest that only Enoch Powell felt this way? Have a think about that as well. Pause this, complete the task, and then come back. Okay, so we've had a think about what these sources can tell us about attitudes towards economic migrants. I want you to have a think about whether or not those attitudes have changed over time. Are there any similarities between the way that both of these groups were treated by British people? Are there any differences? And if so, why do you think those might be? I want you also to have a think about what attitudes are towards economic migrants now. So think about people that have moved to Britain as a result of not being able to afford where they live or not being able to make enough money where they live. How do people react towards them now? And what do you think about that? Should we accept economic migrants? If so, why? Should we not accept economic migrants? If so, why? Pause the video, have a go at answering those questions, and then come back for our final task. Okay, your final task is to have a think about the treatment of these migrants in Britain. Look at how the Irish people were treated. Look at how people from the West Indies were treated. And I want you to think about whether or not the treatment of these migrants in Britain was right. And then I want you to think about why. So if you think it was right, if you think they should have been treated in the way that they were, why? If you think it was wrong, why? Why is it wrong? I also want you to think about, or to see if you can find out about anything further on the Windrush generation. In the past few years in Britain, there have been some controversial decisions made about people who came to Britain on the SS Windrush. So maybe have a look and see if you can find out about that. And if you can, I would love to hear your thoughts or any of the information that you found out. So your work should be submitted via Show My Homework or emailed to your teacher. Good luck!